Hello, everybody. Anybody? Hello. How you doing? How you doing today? How y'all feeling? Feeling good? Hey, George. Thanks for tuning in. This is gonna be a. This is my first time trying this. I'm gonna be trying to do a live review of the new Avatar Legends book. For a couple of reasons. First, I think this is awesome, and I just want to talk about it. Second is I'm building up a little bit of hype for our, me and George's, Mr. Dragonlord's, campaign starting on Monday here on this channel at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, of Avatar Legends. We're just going to be doing a test run of it, so probably have more ideas forming as that campaign goes on. But also, because I read this all in, like, one train ride. It's just, like, I tried to internalize all the information, but there's a lot. As you can see, there's 306 pages. So, we're gonna... I'm not gonna be reading all of this. Mostly we're just gonna be skimming. Let me turn on my cursor here so y'all can see what I'm pointing at when I read. But it's also just to help me figure out, you know, what's important to me, and to think critically about this and how I want to proceed when I build this campaign. So it's for all of us. I suspect most people who watch this will watch as a VOD, but if you're watching this live and you want to chat, feel free to hop in, ask questions, offer opinions, say controversial things, and get this, yeah, tell the algorithm that this is the kind of stuff you want to see. And, thanks, Jack. I will fart, but if you spend reward points on anything else, I'm just gonna be refunding them. Until you do it too much, and then you'll have to learn your own lesson. So this is, let's just get started, shall we? This is Avatar Legends, the role-playing game. A couple things regarding this review. First of all, I'm just gonna be examining the book as is. Like all TTRPGs, you know, you can modify it, and you can add in all sorts of stuff, but we're going to take this rules as written. No extra modifiers, no homebrew stuff added in. We're just going to be examining what this module, as played, as written, does, if that's good, if it serves the purpose it does. Spoiler alert, in my opinion, it does. But that's it. I will be drawing from, you know, the shows, because obviously this module is trying to emulate the action of the shows and the books and so forth. But we're just going to be examining how that lives up to that, because it's important, and if that's fun to do. And you know, who that's for, as it were. I'll also be comparing this a lot to Dungeons & Dragons, because, you know, that's what this channel is mostly all about. Yes, the film, we don't talk about the film. The shows, excellent shows. AhDah's Last Airbender is excellent. Korra, I have my misgivings, but overall pretty good. Just to start, I think it's actually what I want to talk about to start is Dungeons & Dragons. Just so we have not a baseline, but a source of comparison here. Because one of the things, I don't want to say one of the problems, but Dungeons & Dragons is a game that's very much built around fighting, built around resolving conflicts by casting spells and punching, and winning. It's done to facilitate that, and I have my gripes with that. As you know, on this channel we run improvised Dungeons & Dragons games that are very story-focused, so a lot of the time we just ignore those mechanics. And for good reason, they're just not built to facilitate that kind of thing. But I also run a lot of regular games with Dungeons & Dragons, and those involve a lot of combat. You know, you're expected to fight. And as we go through, I just want y'all to keep that in mind, that the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons in a very specific way are built to facilitate and encourage and reward doing that. And that's why I'm going to be drawing comparisons a lot to this game, which is different. There's fighting, but it's... there's combat, but there's not fighting, if that makes sense. Not just fighting for the sake of fighting. So, let's just dive into this. Based off of the comics, blah blah blah, we're mostly going to be skimming, and I'll just be summarizing a lot of the basic mechanics here, at least as far as I remember them. I might need to do a little review myself, because some of it is a little complicated, though much less complicated than 5th edition, or any other crunchy RPG you're going to be playing. But we'll start off. I do want to read out loud at least the welcoming segments here, because that's going to tell us, what's the point of this? What is this? Well, who's it for, and why are we playing? So let's just see what this book, what this TTRPG has to say about itself. I got my handy-dandy dungeon meowster mug here, so I'm a professional. It's time for some business. Oh, hey, Cass. This is just a review thing, but feel free. Yes, on Monday, we're going to be running a full Avatar campaign. Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You'll probably be doing stuff, but you can always watch the VODs. Okay. So, and one more thing. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be diving into it. One more thing. This game is based on the Powered by the Apocalypse system. I'm not sure if they acknowledge that in this book, but it's based on that system. All you need is 2d6s. To be honest, I haven't played a lot of other Powered by the Apocalypse games, so I'm not going to be drawing too many comparisons there. I don't know what's they purposely changed in this book. I think I have a few ideas, but just so y'all know, there's other games that play like this one. Yes, very excited. Okay, so this introduces you to Avatar Legends, blah blah blah. It covers the materials. Heroic adventure game set in Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. So right away, we know those take primacy over the books, and I think we'll see why that's important later on. Inspired by Asian and North American indigenous cultures, blah, 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 which I think is awesome. With D&D, it's very medieval Western fantasy tradition, and here it's the exact opposite. I'm not sure if I have it. Here's my, for instance, here's one of my favorite face masks, which is based off the Pacific Northwest aesthetic. This is more of the Water Tribe in these games is based more off the Inuit aesthetic, but you see a lot of mix and mash of the whole Pacific Rim, basically, and a bit of the Tibetan plateau. I do love the art, yes. So, blah blah blah, we don't need to read this. Many people in the Avatarverse are benders, but here's where we get to the real tofu and potatoes of this game. The Avatar, blah blah blah, has been responsible for maintaining balance in the world, serving as a bridge between the spiritual and physical planes of existence. So that, see how balance is bolded there? That's what this whole game is about, is balance. That's the whole theming. And that's the theming of the shows, too, if you've never watched them. It's about keeping balance. I mean, that's what the first thing they say in the first episode, and they say at the beginning of every episode. The nations lived in harmony, the Fire Nation attacked, only the Avatar can restore balance. Balance is what's important, and we're going to see that that is the main ideological driver of this game, and also possibly even to its detriment. Because I do have a few... There's some shortcomings, I think, to this game. I wouldn't call them bad things, it's just made to facilitate something very specific. And those are shortcomings. So, blah blah blah, we don't need to go over the world building of Avatar. So, what is Avatar Legends, the role-playing game? You and your friends tell a story about... Yeah, I mean, that is going to be one of my gripes, is that it's centrist. You'll see, because the centrism is based in character growth, like competing values in a very real sense, but it does... I mean, that's more a problem with the shows. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just foreshadowing. So, you and your friends tell a story about a group of young heroes who join together to fight for what's right in a complicated and nuanced world. So, already we have a very specific outline of events. We'll see further down more. One of your friends acts as the GM, blah, blah, blah. It focuses on the stories of adventure and the personal journeys of heroes through various trials in their lives. So this is all about personal character growth, and I think that's awesome, because that's how you tell a good story. It's a game for people of all ages. I think they say this later on, but it's specifically and explicitly family-friendly, which I think is fine, and I think we'll be streaming this family-friendly too. We'll see. Yeah, Zuko is awesome, and that's Zuko stories, I think, what they were going for when they built these rules, to decent effect. So we don't need to know what a TTRPG is. We got heroes, blah blah blah. Each hero is known as a PC. I mean, this is really basic stuff. There is something here in the rules, so I'm going to read that on the section on the rules. For the most part, it plays like a conversation, and I think that's a great way to describe this game specifically. You take turns speaking, describing action. The conversation leads to places of uncertainty. And I really like how this module emphasizes the importance of uncertainty. That's when there's uncertainty, that's when you look to the rules, and otherwise, you don't. You just tell the story. And that's a good guiding principle for GMing this game. I don't think it's the central one, but it's a really good rule of thumb that I think is missing from a lot of crunchier games. The GM acts as impartial judge, blah blah blah. I don't know if I agree with that wording, because as the GM, you're supposed to encourage character growth, but I understand the sentiment. And then the story. Telling a story together through role-playing is like writing a screenplay, blah, blah, blah. And this is where we get to something I have mixed feelings about. Thus, each individual story of Avatar Legends, the role-playing game, is like an episode of your own television show. The heroes learn about problems, figure out what they want to do, blah, blah, blah. I think this is a really cool idea. As we go on, we'll see where we run into problems with this outline. Thankfully, this idea of episodic gameplay isn't too built into the mechanics. But as you can guess, if you have an episodic game, how are you gonna, it gets more difficult to tell a serialized game, right? A serialized story. And it's normally that, well, we'll get to it, but, they do acknowledge that normally a single episode rarely resolves anything. You might defeat a dangerous villain, but that doesn't stop, the further problems in the story, and that's fine. But then it's, it's even explicit about there being a season. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay, this is a summary of the Avatarverse. I don't really want to spend too much time on this, because it literally is just a very... you might as well just read the Avatar wiki. That being said, I think in this book, they did a very good job of summarizing all the interesting and necessary information you need to both run and play the game in a relatively concise manner. Plus, I mean, as you'll see, the art that they use to describe things is gorgeous. Zuko alone. I love Zuko. And Zuko alone. Yes, so there is 5 eras here. Yoshi era, Roku era, 100 Years War era. So they're each based on an avatar except for 100 Years War when, Aang was in the iceberg. Which I think is an amazing idea, because it allows you to explore, well, the different areas of the show. It lets you explore whatever you want. But the really neat thing is that they apply different systemic issues, and they make sure those systemic issues are very clear in each. There's no time that's better to live in than other times. There's just different problems. Did somebody make a poll? Oh, was that Bulbasaur? Are you there? I think he's the only mod. Well, whoever made a poll, we'll find out who the best nation is. Where this campaign we're running on Monday is set in the Roku era. Just because I think that's a cool time to run a game. It's not too complicated. I'll explain more as we go. But, yes, the eras, I think that's an excellent idea to help players explore the Avatarverse. 4 nations, you all know this. We got the Earth Kingdom, the fire, air, water. All was good until the trainings attacked. So, this is also a really cool system, and I think it was a great way to navigate the kind of inclusive atmosphere of Avatar, because, you know, you have benders that save the day, but you also have non-benders who the show does a lot to make sure seem equally important. It's iffy on whether that actually happens in the show, but I think in this game, at least mechanically, it actually does a really good job. So, you know, you got water bending, earth bending, fire bending, but then... air bending. But then, you also have weapons and technology, and it's exactly as described. You know, you can learn to use the two swords, chi blocking, and technology. You know, that's more in the Korra era. But there's stuff like, for instance, in the Roku era, an Earth Kingdom technologist in the Roku era might use smoke bombs and traps. And there's a lot there. That being said, something about this module is that... Oh, I made C-Jack a mod? Okay, well, you're a mod, Jack. We'll find out who the greatest. I'm glad I know my own mods. Okay. So, you'll see, like, for the most part, there are mechanics connected to these, but they're built in a way that's very balanced, in my opinion. We'll get to that, though. And I like the way they frame this, too, playing to find out. You're playing to know, you know, what happens next. And there's some great stuff in this book that we don't need to go over here. It's just good GM tools in general. Just talking about, you know, the philosophy behind GMing, creating a safe space. You have these safety tools where, you know, you can sit with friends and outline, you know, where don't you want to cross the line, what's an iffy territory for you, whether that's like arachnophobia or something like cancer or sexual assault, which I like talking with my players before games about this. And you have the X card too, which is I think is a neat idea. I don't know if I'd use it, but it's there. And if you think that's the best way, especially if you have players who are shy, I think that's a good thing to integrate into your campaign. So, let's get into the actual nitty-gritty of this game, shall we? What you need to play: A Quiet Place, dice. This is great. This is powered by the Apocalypse. You only need 2 6-sided dice. That's it. No d20s, no whatevers. And it's still... those 2 dice actually supply, in my opinion, enough variety to create the uncertainty for the DM and the players pretty successfully. Pencils and paper, play materials, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is just world building. I'm not going to linger too long here, because I'm not here to explain, you know, the world of Avatar. I might focus on a few specific parts, but mostly we're just skimming through. Here's the Avatar. Here's where the Avatar came from. I don't know why they, like, spend so much time focusing on the Avatar when most likely you might never actually even meet the Avatar, and you're definitely not playing the Avatar. It says that's explicitly in the book, in this book later on. But I guess it's good to know. I'm a sucker for world maps, so this is great, and I like how they, you know, segment stuff by eras, indicate where stuff is. You know, you can take your own time to look at this map. Suffice to say, it's pretty helpful. 4 nations. I'm pretty sure these are taken right from the show, a lot of these screen caps, but later on you'll see there's more. People voting air are wrong? I don't know. My favorite nation is Swamp Nation. Swamp Nation, that's what it's all about. So, water tribes, blah, blah, blah. What I do appreciate is that, you know, they talk about locations. Foggy Swamp, that's what it's all about. We got a tie between earth and air. Yeah, well, yeah, there is. Look, here it is, Foggy Swamp. It's the home of a group of waterbenders. Don't pay attention. They're not waterbenders. They're swamp benders. They're vine benders, and they're the true nation. They're the only nation. Plant benders. That's what it's all about. Okay. Earth Kingdom, you know, it describes Ba Sing Se, Wan Shi Tong, Fire Nation, blah, 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 blah. It just tells us what bending is and technology, and I do appreciate how they lay out very specific examples of technology. So we're going to be playing in the Roku Era, so for instance, we'll have access to steam-powered Fire Nation ships, alchemical herbs and medicines, a portable water pump to put a dampener on the Firebenders' plans, like... so we have a general idea of the technology, but I think it gives a lot of leeway as a fantasy game. I was expecting a stream about wacky blue people crafted... Oh, sorry, Bingus. This is just a dry review channel right now. More gorgeous art. Yeah, this is the actual... I own the IP rights, by the way, to James Cameron's Avatar, and this is what it's become now. So, Spirit World, blah, blah, blah. I do like this, so... Oh, that's the Order of the White Lotus. This is like a very Western focus on discrimination. But, you know, this is for kids who grew up watching Avatar, mostly in the West, so... but this section describes, like, specific forms of discrimination in specific eras. Like, the Water Tribes have accepted relationships outside of heterosexual cultural norm. However, the Northern Water Tribe maintains strict gender roles well into the Aang era. There's often a disparity between wealthy and poor. So there's a lot of class strife, and mostly talks about it in the context of the Earth Kingdom. And then you have, you know, talking about xenophobic hate, same-sex marriage. So there is this, and genocide, for that matter. So it deals with this, you know, this module isn't shy about dealing with deeper stuff, even if it is family-friendly. And I appreciate it. It's something they mostly leave up to the players and DM to, you know, figure out how they want to navigate, which is, I think, how it should be. But I think it's pretty nice that they outline this and make it very explicit that this is, you know, how this world works. This is a very specific world. It's not modular like Dungeons and Dragons, and it has its own bigotry. And genocide, yeah. This just talks about the Arroz some more. This talks about the breakdown. Adventure set in different periods, blah, blah, blah. So this talks a little more about specific things in Arroz, and we don't need to talk about the world building that much, but there's a few things I want to highlight in this section talking about Arroz. First of all, I don't know why they spent so much time talking about the avatars, because again, probably won't actually meet them on any of these adventures. This, however, I really like. They outline very specific themes, which is important because, as I said, the whole thrust of this game is that balance that's inside people. Justice versus revenge, betrayal versus loyalty, law versus order. We both have very personal ideals and very systemic ideals, and, you know, this gives you some very specific things to do. Call revenge justice. You know, I think this is an awesome idea. I think you don't have to use these things. There's nothing in the rules that says it, but it's a very good guide. Did you say the thrust of the game? Yes. The thrust. Oh, this game will be thrusting, don't worry. And then it also talks about important events that make great hooks for each era. There's also, like, a list later on of hooks, but it does just give hooks. Like, this is stuff that just recently happened. I haven't read the Kyoshi comics, but I assume these are pretty good summaries, because the other ones based on the cartoon eras are also good summaries. And this is giving me a pretty good appreciation of the world building here, because this is like some Game of Thrones shit. Like, look at this. The Camellia Peony War was a brutal succession conflict between Prince Zoryu, who was backed by the Kyoso clan, and his brother Chai-Jin was backed by the Saowon clan. Chai-Jin was Firelord Sheryu's illegitimate son, born, like, you know, this is some cool stuff. So, genuine admiration of whoever put together this section of the book. And you have, like, you know, these various characters you can run into. I think they made some up and they took some from the comics. Threats and challenges, and so forth. They don't explain what Dao Fei are, like what Dao Fei means, I think. Groups of outlaws, but it's not very specific. I actually had to look that up. They include a character sheet for the boulder? No. But there probably is one in one of the modules, because they're making a lot of modules right now. And that was just the Earth Kingdom. Like, look at this. This is the air nomads during the Kyoshi era. I'm going to just go to the Avatar Roku era, because that's where this campaign is going to be about, and this is what I focused on when I decided to do it, so I know this section a little better anyways. Avatar Roku era. There's some interesting, like, this era focuses a lot on some interesting political intrigue. Even though there's no outright war, there's a lot of exploitation and this very interesting philosophical discussion happening. Connection versus isolation. Internal conflicts versus external problems. Testing alliances, resources, and industrialization. Like, it's this late colonialist, early imperialist era that this is taking place in. And this module is really explicit about the conflicts that happen. So you have, like, these conflicts here. The Northern Passage. For years, the Northern Water Tribe and Northern Earth Kingdom have been embroiled in a dispute over local fishing and trade routes. And so on. The Boulder doesn't think this game could handle a Boulder character sheet. And you have, like, this really interesting subplot here where, I thought this would be a good hook for a main campaign, this Grand Tour of Unity. You have dragon hunting starting. You have this really interesting subplot here of, like, air nomads and this kind of the Fire Nation kind of acting as this allegory for Western appropriation of Buddhist ideals. Like, it's really clever world building, in my opinion. It simplifies these conflicts just enough that they can be used for a game for children and family, but still complex enough that the issues can be discussed in a way that's really relevant to real life. So, blah blah blah. Let's skip ahead a bit, because this is just a lot of world building and we don't need to dwell on it that much. I appreciate this page here. Like, it's just a thing dedicated to the genocide that happened. Kind of sends chills, like, the way this... There's supposed to be, like, a whole, like, you know, like the other pages, but it's just this. Neat idea. There's our boy. That's our boy. There he is. And I do like how during, like, this gives, like, playing a Fire Nation character during this era where they're, you know, basically this fascist imperialist country, and talking about the diversity of that. We won't be dealing with that in this campaign. Well, maybe we will, actually, because the themes are already there. So here's the Aang era. We're just going to keep going. And here's the Korra era. And here we go. Here's the next chapter. The fundamentals of play. So let's talk about the actual mechanics of this game now, shall we? More like nosing. So here's the fundamentals of the game itself. I really like how this starts off talking about the conversation. Talk about interesting things your characters do. Playing make-believe wasn't all in your head. And this is like that, but just with some dice, basically. You're also timing the conversation when you slip directly into your character's shoes, no longer narrating, but actually taking on persona. Like, it's a great way to summarize this for anybody who hasn't played a TTRPG before. Blah, blah, blah. We don't need to dwell too long on this. So here's where we get back into this idea of this being an episodic show. You know, they talk a lot about framing scenes and literally dividing stuff into Act 1 and Act 2. And, you know, I get what they're doing, because, first of all, I think that's a great way to tell a narrative, and this is an entirely narratively driven game, and they're trying to emulate the show, right? It's just, you know, I'm not sure if this is the perfect metaphor to stick to this much for a tabletop RPG. But maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know. I do like this at the end. Skip the boring stuff and get right to the core of what's happening or what's about to happen, which is what anybody who has ever written a play will tell you. And it feels like you're writing a script together almost is the sense I'm getting from this game. Gotta do hard scene framing, less room for negotiation. I do appreciate these examples they give that are rather detailed. And I like this, what do you do? Which, if you've ever GM'd, is like the first thing you learned how to say, but, good to know if you've never GM'd before. They put a lot of emphasis on this idea of fictional positioning, of things being fictionally appropriate. And it feels sometimes like they're just using this as a way to skirt around defining mechanics, for better or worse. But there is this very strong focus on the fiction, like the prose of the game. That said, there's a big difference between wanting to know a bit more about a situation before making a decision and trying to make the decision all over again because you don't like the mess you caused. This is nice space except for players. So this is a really neat idea, and I'm not sure how this works in other Powered by the Apocalypse games, but this whole game is based on moves. We'll explain moves more as we go on, but I really like the idea of these moves being triggered rather than you declaring, like, I'm going to persuade or I'm going to intimidate. You do something, and then that triggers it. You're like, I want to walk up to the guard and flex my muscle and breathe fire, and then that triggers your intimidate move. Like, the DM will either say, oh, you can roll intimidation, or you're like, you say what you're going to do and then ask if that's an intimidation check. And sometimes the GM will just say, no, you're actually relying on your skills and training, because your skills and training involve you being a showman or whatever. It puts the onus. It very much emphasizes role playing. So if that's not your cup of tea, this isn't a good game for you. But it forces the player basically to be the character. You're not just going through the motions. You have to be moving the story yourself and the dialogue. And I think that's a really awesome idea. Okay, rolling dice. We don't gotta... So the way the game actually works, I guess we should get down to that. You roll 2 6-sided die, 2d6, and you add your stat. You only have 4 base stats, ever. There's just Harmony, Passion, etc., and 2 others, the names of which I can't remember right now. Creativity, and the last one I don't remember. Time to turn into my PC. Yes. That's exactly it. And I do like this idea, if you get a 10 plus, then it's a strong hit. You just automatically succeed. 7 to 9, things are a little funky, and 6 or below, you fail. And I like this because it's basically, there's a concept in improv, which is, I think, what this module is trying to do is basically make improvised theater. There's a concept in improv called yes-anding, where something happens, and instead of just being like, okay, we did that, and then you move on to the next thing, that thing gets yes-anded. Yes, you succeed in stealing the cabbages, and you walk away with the cabbages, or you get a weak hit. Yes, you succeeded in stealing the cabbages, but the cabbage merchant saw you, and so on. And I'm saying that because there's cabbages right here, and we love our cabbage merchant boy. What if it's a 1? Then it's just a miss. Rules is written. Remember, this is a straight. We're just treating this book as if that's the only rule, but I'm sure you could probably homebrew like a crit fail rule if you really wanted to, or just the GM could be like, oh, a 1/1. Well, wait, you can't get a 1. Never. You know what? Okay. The minimum is 2. Actually, you can get a 1 because you can have a -1 on a stat. So you can get a 1 or a 0. So there. There are only 7 basic moves, and again, this is something I really appreciate. I think 5th edition has like 15 different skills that are very specific. These are 7 basic moves, and between them all, you can basically accomplish any sort of check outside of combat. We'll get to combat later. But basically, I really like what this says. Triggers only happen when there is uncertainty. And this is a very good thing to specify. Because that uncertainty is, of course, what drives the game. So, core elements. Fatigue. This is your health. But I like how they treat it, you know. It's about being emotionally fatigued. You rarely... It's not like taking damage. It's about reaching this point where you're exhausted, and then you start taking conditions, which we'll get to later. But fatigue is also kind of your power currency in this game. You know, to do certain things, you need to take on fatigue. And fatigue isn't super easy to clear. You can guide and comfort other people's fatigue away, but I like how this idea of fatigue draws a direct link between your health, your ability to do things, and your emotional state, and your ability to roleplay, and the state of your character that you will be roleplaying. I think that's an awesome idea. It basically forces this mechanic of emotional endurance and energy, which is the core of this game, is exploring emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, and emotional energy. And to add on to that, when you start losing too much fatigue, when you go past your limit, and from certain abilities, you get these conditions, and they're like afraid, angry, guilty, insecure, troubled. And if you get all the conditions, then you pass out or you give up or whatever. It leaves that purposefully loose. You don't just faint or die. You either give in, like the DM kind of takes control of your character. But I like how it has these conditions. First of all, they're very emotionally based, and they force the player to adopt that emotion in a specific way. They also have these very specific mechanical things that they affect. And they can only be cleared by doing specific things. You become unconscious, injured, or distraught if you get all 5 of them. And I mean, just look at these. Afraid, angry, guilty, insecure, troubled. These are really cool ideas, right? These are things that affect your character in a very fundamental way, and they made it mechanical, which is a great idea. And you can clear them by doing specific things. So this moves us on to the other core stat you have. And this one, I think it's a really cool idea, but I'm a little more iffy on. And this is getting back cast to this whole problem. It's more of a philosophical problem that it makes this core to the game. I get it, but I see, like, it's... Well, let's discuss it first. So this is called balance. Every character has a balance. NPCs only have balance that goes one ways, but the player characters have 2 principles. And they're stuff like trust, as it says here, trust and self-reliance. So you got trust on the left, self-reliance on the right, and your character will move between the two. And I think that's a really cool idea, you know, mechanically integrating these 2 ideologies that your character is supposed to hold into the decision-making of the game. And they kind of leave it purposefully vague as to how your balance is affected. There's like moves that affect your balance. It's just like the thing is that the game makes balance, like, it gives you bonuses to certain things and takes them away from other things. Let's just read the example here. So Quartz the Guardian has a balance track split between trust and self-reliance. Quartz's center is currently at +1 trust, -1 +1 trust, -1 self-reliance, and his balance is at +2 trust, -2 self-reliance. When talking to another major NPC, a smarmy villain asking for Quartz's trust, he's told to shift his balance towards trust. That would put it at +3 trust, -3 self-reliance, and put Quartz right on the edge of losing his balance. Later, with his balance and center in the same place, Quartz is told to shift his balance towards center. He has to shift his balance back to +2 trust. You know, it's too complicated for the mechanic it's supposed to be exemplifying, or for what it's supposed to trying to accomplish. It's because this game has to center around balance. That's the theming and principle of this game. But it just, like, it's hard to make the players care. It seems. I mean, we'll find out as you run the module, but it seems kind of hard to make the players care about this. Because you actually get bonuses from being off-center. To some things, it's just, like, risky. But it also forces your character to evolve. And it just seems so counterproductive to the way that the game emphasizes character growth. And it even says, later on that your character grows when their center of balance changes, and it's just a bit confusing. Maybe it'll become more clear as I run it. But it seems like they really want to, have their cake and eat it too here, where they really want to emphasize balance, but they also really want to emphasize growth. And by the way, that's, I think, also an issue with the Legend of Korra series, but that's a whole other can of beans. So we'll come back a little more to balance later, because there's more about it. That's just my feelings on the thing. Why in the example does the villain just asking a question shift Quartz's balance? That's a great question, and we're going to get to that. Sorry, Bingus, we'll get to that, because you'll actually see later on there's specific moves for that. Like, that's actually a mechanical thing. Mostly. I actually think the way balance is affected by NPCs and by the GM is really well built. It's just, there's not, like, the motivation around keeping balance just doesn't seem... It just seems a little vague. Like, it doesn't really make sense. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I just need to read better or something. But in that case, it's already on the book, because I already understand everything else intuitively, and balance I still cannot get, even after running that one shot in September based on this system. So, blah, blah, blah. This is pretty basic stuff about starting, choose an era, set expectations. This is a section I really like. There's no alignment in this game, right? But it says you need to assume specific things about this game. And I think this is just good stuff. Maybe it's because, I run tabletops for a living, right? And I get a lot of players who, like, because of the pressure to either play a unique character or just because they're like that, they play things that just seem counteractive to what the rest of the party wants to accomplish, like the spirit of the game, for better or worse. But this game is very specific about what your character can know and do and must do, in a good way, I think. So, first of all, you're all skilled martial artists right off the bat. I think that's a great caveat to add in. That's not to say, I don't think it's... I think you could play, like, a character in a wheelchair and have them be martial artists, like happens in the show, but it just makes explicit, like, you have to be able to fight. And you'll see why that's important later. You have all answered the call willingly, which is another awesome, awesome thing to add, because nobody wants to have that... It just doesn't work with the mechanics and story of this game to have a player who doesn't want to, do good things, who doesn't want to journey and adventure. Also, very important, you aren't killers or villains. Like, this game just explicitly prohibits murder hoboing. Not that I have a problem with murder hoboing parties necessarily in D&D, but again, with this game specifically, it would just be impossible mechanically for that to work. You're friendly. You all like each other for the most part. You can be rivals, but you have to get along with the other players. Again, this is explicitly baked into the rules, and I like that. Also, most importantly, you are still growing and learning. your character is not perfect, and they want to grow and learn. And you know, maybe if you're a player and you're seeing this, you're like, yeah, I get it. But as a GM, I really cannot emphasize enough how nice it is and refreshing to just see this explicitly outlined in this book as a rule. If everybody in the party wants to be a murder hobo, that's great. My experience is some want to and some don't want to, and that's when we run into issues with murder hoboing, right? This game just explicitly prohibited, and it doesn't work mechanically anyways, as you'll see later on. And also, this game is about redemption and loss. You know, this is going back to what I said about this trying to kind of emulate the Zuko arc with each character. Everybody has their faults. You'll see later on, like, there aren't classes, there are playbooks, and each one is unique, and each one, you know, has problems that you're supposed to redeem yourself with in pretty unique ways, and I think that's a great idea. But then we see here again, others have committed themselves to making the world better, but have lost balance and are on the path to making terrible decisions. Again, you know, I get what they're going with the balance, but what if, you know, you just, what if one of these ideals is just objectively better than the other? You know, they do a cool thing later with that idea, so I'm gonna put a little pin in that. But it's, again, I just, the balance system, it just seems like they're trying to do something and it's just not there. But let's move on to making characters. Good, I'm glad you like your playbook, George. Oh, and one thing I will say, since we're at this section now, I don't know what they were thinking with this book, but for some reason they made like unique character sheets for every playbook, which is fine. That's a great idea, actually, as you'll see. But they didn't make, in the quick start game, they made like these nice little sheets that you could fill in specific spots on, and it was a great idea. But they just didn't include them in this PDF. That's more of like just a technical gripe. I don't know why. I don't know, like maybe somebody just didn't think to include it in this. But like, it's just, where is it? I want those sheets so I can give them to my players. Now we have to make them up in Roll20 instead. This is a part that I have mixed feelings about. I get that this section is supposed to be, basically, this section is supposed to be about helping a GM set up the scope of their game. And maybe you're supposed to do it like in conversation with the players, which is fine. But it's this very like dry walkthrough of how to set up a campaign. And I guess they had to include this for people who've never run a TTRPG before. But it's just like I don't know how to. They want you to make a very specific kind of campaign, and I'm not sure I agree with this idea. Remember, I'm reviewing this rules as written, and technically, this is supposed to be the outline of how you create the campaign. I'm probably not going to do this. I'm not going to. You'll see later, as it says here, this campaign creation worksheet. Probably not going to use that because I just like it just doesn't seem. This doesn't seem necessary. Like I don't get why they added this. So basically they say you can have a broad scope or you can have a narrow scope of geography and specific conflicts. That's an okay thing to point out. I don't get why that's necessary. And then you gotta choose a group focus. And I guess the idea is to encourage, you know, that all the players to be on the same page about something. But I don't think that's something you need to establish ahead of time. Again, it feels like they're trying to set this up to be a show. And that's just, you know, after everything they said about this being a conversation, it's so weird that they're trying to now force this to be a very specific, objective-oriented game. I'm probably going to ignore this when I'm game building, but the idea is, you know, you set a group focus, you want to defeat the Fire Lord, you want to protect the Spirit Realm, you want to change the feudal system. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, as a GM, improv campaign, Well, if y'all are regulars on this channel, you know I've tried running improvised campaigns before to differing effect. I think I'll try it again sometime. Could the focus just be about the start of the journey, and then the players can deviate or whatever? Yes. And actually, I think it suggests that at one point. No, it doesn't. Well, you'll see. But it is explicitly supposed to be... your group focuses the purpose which first united your companions to achieve a specific goal. It can be just... They literally call it the pilot episode. And I get wanting to objectively outline that. But, you know, as a GM, I feel like they should just be telling the GM, you know, you should just try to make something that compels your players. And if they're at all reasonable people, they'll know to focus on that. But, you know, maybe that's me backseat GM. So I won't focus too much on that. If you're, but this, like, it's very specifically outlines this, right? It's just a strange thing to add. Outline the inciting incident. Like, the inciting incident is the plot of your series pilot episode. And it's you're supposed to do it in a very specific format. We befriend ally who gave us access to valuable item, act by act. And again, it's a cool idea, but it feels like they're trying to make it too much like a show and not enough like a conversation, like they said earlier. It's I get maybe that structure being important or necessary for somebody who's very new to role-playing, but, you know, if this is technically rules as written, this is supposed to be how you're supposed to outline the game, and it just seems like a bizarre structure to add to something that's supposed to be, by design, pretty loose. I'm just there for the fun. I never played the Powered by the Apocalypse system. It's fine, George. But that's I think that's just a straight shortcoming of this book. I think that's even something that's not good about this book. Is just how they structure this, and they say at no point, you know, it's okay if you don't do this. They don't say that. If they said that, then okay, but they don't say that. You're just supposed to do this. It's just a really weird choice. I've been doing homework while listening, so I missed some, but is the role that the actual avatar plays in a given campaign specified in this? No, we'll get to that, actually, because it says something very specific about that I appreciate. But good question. So, you're the hero, blah, 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 choosing a playbook. This, I think, is an awesome idea. I love this idea in the game. If this... I love playbooks. I love this idea of playbooks. I think it plays perfectly into the vision they had for this game, and I think it'll be fun to play with them. Basically, instead of classes, like Wizard or Rogue... Actually, there is a Rogue playbook, so that's a bad example, but it's different. But instead of Wizard or Barbarian or whatever, you have these playbooks that are defined by the narrative role the character plays. And yes, George is playing the Adamant. And your growth as a character, your abilities, or specific moves as a character are defined by your role in the narrative, which is an amazing idea. I don't, like, that's just such a good idea. It's so good. So yeah, just to give some examples, George is playing the Adamant here. So the Adamant will fix the world even if it means breaking all the rules. Playing the Adamant if you want to contend with what doing right means in a complicated world. Each of these playbooks has different ideals on the balance sheet, and for the most part, I think they're pretty well chosen, and they have different bonds and different moves, and they have different growth, like they literally level up through different criteria. So awesome idea, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how these playbooks work in the game. We'll dive more into those later. And then it talks about your character concept, and this is just a bit more loose. Like, this is basic player stuff. It asks this in pretty much every TTRPG book, so we won't dwell too much on it. But, you know, who are you? What are you doing? Do you seek revenge? Blah, blah, blah. And I like this little discussion, concept or playbook first. Did I come up with a character concept or a playbook first? Either way can work, but try to choose your playbook first and let it guide you, which is good advice, I think, because the playbooks are literally made to outline your character's growth in a very, in a good way. Like, it's not limiting, or it is limiting, but creativity is the limitation is the birthplace of creativity. And this is also a section I really appreciate. It's not important, but it lets you name your character. And it gives these awesome tables of names derived specifically from the culture that the nation is based on. We have air nomad names based on Hindi words with specific meanings. And they got, of course, my man Swamp Nation names. So you can stay tuned for Achaidh sometime sometime during the campaign. Achaidh, Home River, my man Achaidh, Cedar Tree by. Yeah, I just a little thing, but I really appreciate that they added this in. Okay, so let's talk a little more crunchy mechanics now. Training and fighting style. So training, remember what we talked about before, that's your bending style or your weapon, or weapons or technology. And then you have a fighting style. It changes the way your character fights, makes them different from other benders of the same element. If you're a weapon fighter, you might write down Boomerang Expert. So it's a little loose. But you can specialize in any of these types of martial training. What we discussed earlier, weapons, technology, earthbending. All of these are relatively balanced well against each other. That's something we'll have to find out as we play. But it gives examples of fighting style, like for earthbending, you can do sandbending. You can move through the earth. You can do seismic sense. For weapons, you can do a golden meteor hammer. You can have acrobatic chi blocking. For technology, you can have throwable bomb pellets, electrified glove, and so on and so forth. And I like how it doesn't give you the too overpowered ones. You'll see later on, you do have access to like lightning and lava bending, but those are higher level things that you acquire as your character grows, which, again, great idea. Technology, yeah, I think they did a really good job of making the non-benders still viable and interesting in this game. So then we have background, and this is pretty banal. Honestly, I think this is the most comparable to Dungeons and Dragons. Just choose a background, and that's it. Like, it doesn't really affect much. But it's nice just to outline. And I think it even says somewhere here that you can just make up your own. And then you choose a hometown, which, thanks to the map being such a big place, that's not too difficult, and you can obviously make one up. Demeanors, again, this is pretty loose. And your look and so forth. This is all, like, explicitly loose stuff you can make up for your character. It's not supposed to be mechanically relevant. It's just, well, it is mechanically relevant because it affects the narrative, and the narrative affects the mechanics in this game, but you get what I mean. And then we have history questions, and I do like how it outlines this. There's 5 questions that you have to answer in your playbook, but we'll get to those once we look at the playbooks. So you have 4 stats, and I like how simple this is, but still broad enough that it defines, that it covers pretty much everything. Creativity, focus, harmony, passion, and of course your playbook defines your stats in that. They're all relatively, like, it's only up to a +2 on each of these stats, and to a -1. But that provides enough variety and enough difference in probability that it does make a difference in terms of gameplay. At least as far as I could tell from the one-shot we ran in September. And I mean, these are just good, like, these are good things to exemplify, because it doesn't matter if your character is good or bad. Each person has some level of this inside of them, at least for the purposes of this narrative. Creativity, focus, harmony, passion, all relatively vague things that are still definable enough that we know what each of these applies to, and we can find whatever task we're doing, find a part of one of these in it. And it fits in really well with the world building. Fatigue, conditions, balance, we already talked about that. So the moment of balance. Again, balance is confusing, but we'll try to explain this. So your playbook's moment of balance doesn't require any decisions to be made, but it's important that you familiarize yourself with it. Your moment of balance is a special and extremely powerful move that resolves when an entire scene of conflict is described on your sheet. When you invoke it, you don't roll. Instead, you take the spotlight and gain control of the scene. Because your moment of balance is so powerful and marks a significant milestone, your character must unlock their moment of balance through advancements. Then you must have your balance at your center. I actually think this is a really cool idea. I think it puts a lot on the player. But then again, if your character's been building up to this over the course of several sessions, I think it could be cool. We're going to try to do it and see how it plays out. But again, when you use it, the action should feel like the most memorable scene or episode in the TV series of your game. It feels like they're trying to force that dare I say, Western traditional Hollywood style 3-act narrative journey on this conversation that's based on Eastern philosophy. It's just there's like this incongruence there, and I don't know how that will play out. It's a really neat idea, but making that so mechanically focused is just, again, I don't know. It's strange. No TV series, bugger off. I don't want to poison the well for you, George. Like, this could be fun. I don't want to poison the well with this idea that everything to do with balance or this TV series idea is bad, because I think trying to emulate the TV series is the mission of this book. I think they kind of see the forest for the trees, as it were, and it gets puts a lot of onus in some places and takes away from others in a way that we'll have to see how it plays out, but I'm uncertain about it. Okay. That being said, overall, still, again, this game looks awesome, and I'm excited to play it. So you get playbook moves, and we'll explain that in a bit. Don't fill out connections yet. Do I have to fight? Yes. So you have combat techniques mastered and learned, and we'll get to that. We don't have to talk about that now because it explains it in more detail later. But you learn techniques as you play. And this, I think, is actually a really cool idea. It's called the growth question. You'll see later on, but basically at the end of every episode session, you and all the other players, you're like, did we help out the community today? And I know it's very Sesame Street, but it's very, I think it's a neat idea. You'll see in the playbooks, because it specifies them, but the way you level up is by answering yes to these growth questions. And in that way, it ties character growth and narrative movement directly into character advancement, and I think that is an awesome idea. I'm not sure how I feel about the specific questions. Again, rules is written, but I guess you could change them if you don't like them. But I think that's an awesome idea. Did they talk about their intended audience? Yes, they did cast at the beginning. They said that this was intended for all ages. It's supposed to be family friendly, but it's not just for kids, and they're very explicit about that. So, Bingus, I don't know if you're still listening, but here's the section you were waiting for. Can I be the Avatar? And I'm just going to read what they say here. The Avatar is the most powerful bender in the world during each age, reincarnated endlessly to help bring balance to the world. It's only natural that you might want to play as them, especially if you're a longtime fan. However, each era already has an established Avatar, blah blah blah. The most important reason there aren't rules for playing the Avatar is that being the Avatar creates an imbalance, again we got the balance thing, but I think it's valid this time, of narrative importance in the game. You're the main character even if you don't intend to be. This means that the other players can get pushed to the side and get less spotlight time during the game, while the rest of your team Avatar are important. Whoever plays the Avatar will inevitably get the lion's share of attention in the game as NPCs seek them out for advice, challenge their rulings, try to sway them. In normal play, every character is as important as everyone else, and every character gets to contribute to the story equally in their own unique ways. I think that's great reasoning. I would not allow a player to be the Avatar in this campaign. Rules is written, you can't be. I'm sure you could modify this game to make everybody be an Avatar, or to have one player be the avatar and have that still be kind of fun. But as far as I'm concerned, I think they give good reasoning why you can't be the avatar, and that's that. Oh, hey Loria. Ooh, doggy. Simple solution, multiple avatar campaign. Yeah, that could be fun. There isn't really higher level. Like I said, this game is built all around character growth. So I don't even know if it's possible to start a campaign where you are strong or stronger than the things you'll face. But again, you'll see more of that as we go. We're about halfway through. Oh my god, this is taking longer than I expected, but it's helping me work through all this. Thank you all for tuning in so far. I'm just going to check to see if I got any messages here. Sorry, just replying to a client. It's fine. Okay. Let's dive back into things. What about somebody who thinks they are the avatar? That could be funny, actually. That could be that could, I think there's a playbook that could play into. Actually, Cass, that is the subplot of the Avatar Kyoshi comics, I think. She lived... It says this in the book. We can scroll up, but I don't want to. But it says in the books, they actually identified somebody else as the Avatar, and she was like his servant or whatever. I don't know what... I haven't read the comics, but I assume there was some sort of sitcom situation where she did all the bending for him, and he thought he was the true Avatar. And then revelation upon revelation, Kyoshi is the Avatar. So that's an actual plot point already told in the story of Avatar. Sorry to undercut you. Damn it. There you go. I hope you're happy. Okay. So here's the moves. Here's how the actual goddamn play of the game works. So, for the most part, this is like... I'd say this game is about 90% straight roleplay. For good reason. That's how it's built. I think that's fine. That was my experience running the one-shot. This is like 90-95% pure roleplay, but obviously, when there's uncertainty, you need to resolve it. So, there's this little blurb here. Always follow the fiction. As you describe what your character does and says, the GM responds by describing what the NPC would do. There's the conversation of the game. At some point, you'll come to a situation where the outcome of your action is uncertain or dangerous, or otherwise triggers one of the game's moves. When that happens, turn to the triggered move, roll the dice, and do what the move says. There's also, like, GM moves, which are purposefully vague in this, and I don't... Again, like the bit earlier about outlining about the scope of the game, I think it's unnecessary. But the moves for the players mechanically, I think is a really good idea. So we can skip this. The best way to describe moves is just telling you what they do, and we'll just read the blurbs here because most of this is just giving examples. But here's basic moves. So this is one I think you actually can trigger by just saying to the DM, I want to assess a situation. The other ones you have to trigger, but this one, you just assess a situation. So you roll with creativity. On a 7 to 9, ask 1 question. On a 10 plus, ask 2. Take +1 ongoing when acting on the answers. There's no advantage in this game. That would actually be a neat idea, having advantage, but there isn't in this game. You just get these bonuses of +1, +2, and so forth. What here can I use to blank? Or what is the biggest threat? What should I be on the lookout for? So, pretty basic. This is perception, right? But I like the way that they outline what questions you ask and then are answered, and they mechanically integrate that, which actually makes it more mechanically integrated than perception in 5e, which I think is a neat idea. Guide and comfort. I really like this, and Cass, if you aren't looking at the screen right now, you should, and look at the picture to the right. This is a really cool idea, because this is basically the medicine healing of this game. When you honestly guide and comfort another person, roll with harmony. On a hit, they choose 1. They embrace your guidance and comfort. They may clear a condition or 2 fatigue, and you may ask 1 question. They must answer honestly. They shut you down, they inflict a condition on you, and you shift their balance in response. So again, these are like specific mechanical things, but they're very much tied into this idea of character growth and balance. And again, really creative, really good idea. And I mean, this is just really sweet. When you do medicine checks on D&D, like, you're like, I patch his wounds, but here, you don't heal people's wounds. You literally, like, you Uncle Iroh them. You're forced to. And that's awesome. I love that. That's just awesome. And it does outline, like, specific stuff, because this one's a bit more vague. And actually, it has a lot of examples, because this is a complicated one. Oh, here it just explains the crunchy stuff. We don't need to deal with that. And then you have Intimidate. When you intimidate an NPC, on a hit, they choose 1. On a 10+, you pick 1, and they cannot choose. So, again, I really like this idea of, you know, imperfect hits and perfect hits, because on an imperfect hit, the NPC you're facing off against chooses 1. And if the GM is good, obviously they'll choose the one that makes sense for the character. And on a 10+, when you're really intimidating, you choose 1. Like this comes right out of base Power of the Apocalypse, but great idea. I like it. Again, this section, like these moves and these playbooks, best parts. Oh, bye, babe. That's my girlfriend in the chat, or was. Plead. When you plead with an NPC, who cares what you think? I read that wrong, but that's funny. When you plead with an NPC, who cares what you think for help, support, or action, roll with Harmony. On a 7 to 9, they need something more. On a 10+, they act now. This is a bit more vague, but it's just a nice way for the GM to force you to roleplay a little more. You know, don't have to dwell too long on this, but good idea. Persuasion check. Push your luck. This is a fun one. I think this is a really fun idea, having this be a mechanic. When you push your luck in a risky situation, say what you want to do and roll with passion. On a hit, you do it, but it costs you to scrape by. On a 10+, your boldness pays off. And by the way, the game explicitly in the book says you can use, like, push your luck when you're facing relatively minor combat to just, like, scare off groups of NPCs to do risky things. Good idea. Rely on your skills and training. This is just a nice catch-all. Nothing too remarkable here. Except, this is just an example I want to highlight. On a hit, you do it. On a 7 or 9, you do it imperfectly. The GM tells you how your approach might lead to unexpected consequences. You can accept those consequences, or mark 1 fatigue. Again, fatigue isn't just your health, it's your currency for doing things. So, again, really well built. Good idea. Where's the bending move? There is none. Yeah, well, there is. There's techniques, but there's not bending moves. We'll get to that later. Your background also determines what kind of information you can attain. Am I missing something? Oh, yeah. But rely on skills and training can be used to, for example, you know, test how good your firebending is in a non-combat situation, how good your aim is with your arrow if you're shooting at apples, and so on and so forth. My goal is to be an anti-Iroh when I'm old. I believe in you, Cass. I think you already are kind of now. Anti-Iroh, that is, not old. Okay. Maybe. When you unlock... Unlike when you push your luck, the consequences for rolling on this move aren't as harsh. Blah, blah, blah. Trick. When you trick an NPC... I mean, this one is as straightforward as it gets. But again, I like this idea of imperfect, you only choose 1. On 10+, you choose 2. And it there's an explicit mechanic there that still is narratively based. Great idea. I know I'm saying great idea after all of these, but I'm a really big fan of this move system and how it's triggered. Help. You help. I mean, the simplest move there is. And then you have... Okay, so these are balance moves. So those were the basic moves we talked about before. Here's where we get into balance, and again, this is where it gets... I think... Honestly, I'm a fan of the balance move system. It's the balance system itself. But I think these moves are a really cool way of mechanically interacting with that. So, basically, when you have... When you're trying to affect balance, you're looking at the character's 2 ideologies. And the GM, hopefully, will be keeping that in mind while you're running this. And have NPCs, or even PCs can do this, basically call characters out on living up to their values. I think this is where the balance system shines, because it creates a very specific mechanic to challenging character actions, which is just something that doesn't exist in a lot of other TTRPGs. So you have live up to your principle. When you take action in accordance with the values of the principle, mark 1 fatigue to roll with that principle instead of whatever stat you would normally roll. So this is where, having your balance shifted is actually good, because you have +2 in, self-reliance, say. So you can mark 1 fatigue and roll with a +2 instead of the 0 maybe you normally roll with. I think that's a cool idea. I don't know how that plays out, because again, the game wants you to keep your balance, but now it's rewarding you for not, but maybe it doesn't want you to keep your balance. Like, the reward scheme here is weird. It's a great idea, but I'm not sure how I feel about it as it plays out. Call someone out, though. I think this is a really awesome idea. When you openly call on someone to live up to their principle, and both NPCs and PCs can do this, shift your balance away from center, then name and roll with their principle. On a hit, they're called to act as you say. They must either do it or mark a condition. On a 7 to 9, they challenge your view. On a miss, they can demand you act in accordance with one of your principles instead. So, I think that's awesome. I think that leads to a lot of really interesting, fun interactions, and this is where the balance system really shines. You force somebody to either live up to their principle, or it hurts you instead. It's a risk move, but it's cool. It's cool. It's a cool idea. And when you deny an NPC calling you, you roll for that principle. And this, I believe, this actually, this is interesting because you want to roll low to deny a call out because you're rolling on that principle. So again, this is where the balance system shines. It's a really cool way to make your character growth mechanically. And then resist shifting balance. When you resist an NPC shifting your balance, roll. On a hit, you maintain your current balance in spite of their words. On a 10+, choose 2. You can clear a condition or mark growth by immediately acting to prove them wrong. So that's subjective, but it's a great way for a GM to force a player to make an emotional commitment. Shift your balance towards the opposite principle, or learn what their principle is. I get the feeling this is going to lead to a lot of, angsty moments, which is not a good or bad thing, but I worry that overusing this might make the game a bit too narmy, so it's up to the GM to make sure that they aren't overusing this mechanic. And finally, lose your balance. If your balance shifts past the end of the track, you lose your balance, you obsess over that principle, you give in or submit to the opposition. So basically, this is another failure condition. Instead of attaining all conditions and fatigues, instead you lose your balance, and you basically lose the encounter. And then you have time to recover, and so on and so forth. So, again, this is something that incentivizes you to not shift your balance, because losing your balance is bad. It makes you lose in whatever way you can in this narrative. But the game also rewards you for having your balance off, and it's a really neat idea, but I'm just not sure how that plays into the player reward system. Okay. So, advancement moves. Here's where we get into advancement, and again, this is, I think this is a cool idea. I don't know how I feel about these exact questions, but the overall idea here is good. At the end of each session, each player answers the following questions. Did you learn something challenging, exciting, or complicated about the world? Did you stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem? Did you guide a companion towards balance or end the session at your center? Each player answers their playbook's unique personal growth questions. For each yes, mark growth. When you have marked for growth, you take a growth advancement. And remember, each playbook also has a question. So in theory, in one session, you could level up and advance, but you probably won't. These are vague enough that I think you could achieve at least one and definitely two, but most of the time every session, which is fine because the leveling up is relatively tame. and I think it's a good idea. I don't know about these exact questions. That's something I'm just gonna have to see as I run this. But I think it's a good way to tie in advancement with narrative and character growth in a very specific way. You also can learn training moves. So this is something you basically just have to be like your GM can either present to you, you know, this guy teaches special firebending and he can teach you a move. What? Could the song be changed? How long has it been playing this song? Full disclosure. Oh, it's because this one was selected on loop. Sorry, guys. There we go. Good catch. I've been into the review. I didn't notice. Okay. My goal is to bring your family back together. Great. So, is your balance... so you find a teacher and they try to teach you a new move, and then you have to answer these questions and roll. And if you get high enough on the roll, then you learn it. And if you don't, then there's other stuff you have to do. I think this is actually a really good idea. So, for example, you go to John, he's like, I will teach you how to lava bend, but you need to, you know, follow my specific training, and it's up to the GM to determine what that is. But it's, you know, if your balance in line with your center, are you free of conditions? Take a +1. You and your teacher share at least one background, +1. Your teacher agree with your reasons for training and learning. If no, -1. The technique easy to grasp based on your training experience and skills. If no, -1. On a hit, you learn the technique, and your master shift your balance, which is, I think is I don't know how, I think it's no comment. On a 10+, you learn it with ease. Just learn it. On a 7 to 9, it takes more time, and you must mark 2 conditions. So again, insecure, angry, whatever. On a miss, you can't learn the technique yet because you need another lesson, and your master will be like, you must find inner balance before you learn this, or you must climb up the 10,000 steps, blah, 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 to learn it. There's a lot of leeway with the GM there. I think this will be fun to implement. It's a great way to reward players with MacGuffins. It's the game's way of adding MacGuffins that reward players explicitly in a way that still ties it in with character action and growth. This outlines how to build custom moves. We're not going to talk about this now. I mean, I think it's a neat idea, but we're only looking at the rules as written, and this is just about this is describing how to homebrew. Which it's nice that they added this in, but we'll skip over this for now. Combat exchanges. So this is how combat works, and I actually really like the combat system in this game because combat, it's not like fighting. It's not like D&D where it's a turn-based system, so to say. It's more like everybody chooses what they're going to do ahead of time, and then you kind of play it out. And again, because your health and stamina and conditions are all tied to your emotions and your balance and your character growth, it's not like you're punching somebody till they die. It's like you're fighting somebody until you either resolve your differences or you get them to capitulate. And it says explicitly in the book, I don't remember where, that death shouldn't happen or very rarely happen, and it's a very serious thing. And again, I think that's a great way to restrict the players in a meaningful way. Are you saying you would prefer it if the game was unbalanced? Yeah, that's right. If I could bring in 20 Tarrasques every session to Avatar Legends, I would. So this just talks about, when are you going to go into combat versus basic moves, and you can, rely on skills and training and push your luck against more minor NPCs if it's not a really important fight, or if this is more about, they want you to go into combat when you're specifically facing off a story-important NPC, or it's about your character's personal growth. But there's no point in going into combat if you're just fighting guards away from a gate. That's not changing anything about your character or the story. It's just an obstacle, so you might as well just roll skills for that. I think that's a great distinction to make. So when you begin combat, just establish what it's like. You can add assessing the situation, or somebody can assess the situations explicitly. People got to be engaged with each other, and then exchange combat happens. Here's how exchange combat works. First, you choose an approach. You either defend and maneuver, advance and attack, or evade and observe. Is that a 69 on Please God Yes? Thanks. T-Jack contributed 66 channel points to make it 69. Amazing, thank you. Where were we? When you defend, when the combat starts, it's not, you don't roll for initiative. Whoever chose defend and maneuver, they go first. Then, everybody who chose advance and attack does their stuff simultaneously. And then everybody who chose evade and observe does their stuff simultaneously. And that's how it happens. And then you choose a technique. So there's basic techniques, and we'll go over those, but there's also advanced techniques, and those are the things you learn that I was talking about earlier from teachers. And you also have a few that come with your playbook, and that come that you can choose at the beginning of the game. So you have your stance move. If you defend and maneuver, you're going to be rolling with focus, advance and attack with passion, and evade and observe. You can choose between creativity or harmony as is appropriate. On a 7 to 9, so once you're in combat, this is where you're going to start draining your fatigue pretty quickly. On a 7 to 9, use one basic or mastered technique. On a 10 plus, choose one from this list instead. Mark one fatigue to use a learned technique, use one practice technique, or use two basic or mastered techniques. You can only use a learned technique if you have a 10 plus. On a miss, you stumble, but you can shift your balance away from center to use one basic technique. So, as you can see in combat, the fatigue and the balance shifting and the conditions, they stack up really fast. So the PCs are incentivized to not stay too long in combat and to try and avoid, getting too into it for the most part, which I think is a good thing, because that's not the focus of this story. You do combat to make characters grow. You don't have characters grow by doing combat. That makes sense? I think I just said the same thing twice. You do combat to make characters grow. You don't make your characters grow to do combat. That's what I meant to say. So this just outlines the step-by-step thing. The GM chooses approaches. Each non-player combatant, the GM chooses an approach. Each player chooses approaches. And the GM doesn't tell what the approaches are. Players should feel free to discuss. Like, there's no such thing as... You don't metagame in combat. You can just discuss what you want to do, because you want to tell a good story. Then the GM reveals what they chose. Then we resolve each approach. So first we do defend and maneuver, advance and attack. When resolving each approach, PCs who chose that approach roll the stance move to see how many techniques they may use. Again, from earlier, we roll. I know this is a lot, but as I know from one shot, when you actually play it out, this is actually a really simple and easy system to use that still allows for very diverse and evolving combat that is uncertain, but usually satisfying. And then finally, if you lose, you'll probably resolve that. But I like this note, you don't resolve losing your balance until everything else is resolved. You can't just go down in the middle of a thing. Everything else plays out, and then the character goes down, which is a good way to keep dramatic tension going. So after the exchange, we see what happens. The NPC might lose, the PCs might lose, and it's gonna depend a lot on the context, what happens. There's no specific, there's no death rules or anything. If only one combatant wants to keep fighting, then no exchange is needed. The attacker simply inflict fatigue or conditions on their targets, and if no combatants are engaging each other, no need for an exchange at all. So it's a neat idea, and what I really like about this system is that D&D is very, compared to D&D again, because I think this is where it diverges the most. D&D is very like, this happens and this happens and this happens. It's a video game style, or I guess RPGs are actually based off D&D, but you understand what I'm saying. This is like an anime style exchange, and I like how they call it an exchange, because you fight and then everybody backs away for a moment and you exchange dialogue. You know, Obi-Wan never told me about your father. No, about your. I think I butchered that quote. And then you re-engage again, and that makes, I think, for much more interesting storytelling, for the most part, than the crunchy exchanges you find in a lot of TTRPGs. So you also have statuses. And these are things you can inflict in-game on the spot. Oh, it was correct. You're right. Okay. Whatever. What time is it? It's 6:30. Oh my god. I have a campaign to run in an hour. I hope I didn't get any messages. Second. Okay, great. We'll wrap this up soon. I didn't expect this to go this long, but I guess I had a lot to say. So, you have statuses. In combat, these are things you can inflict on people or that are taken away. I think this is a really simple but fun way to affect characters. Doomed, you're in grave danger, like you've been set on fire, mark 1 fatigue every few seconds, reach exchange until you're free. Impaired, slow or off balance. Trapped, you're completely helpless, stunned, but you can also be empowered, which is extremely powerful. Clear 1 fatigue at the end of each exchange. Favored, inspired, repaired. So these are relatively vague, but you'll see the techniques like employ specific ones, and the GM is just supposed to describe how that plays out. And I like how you'll see later, but the rules are very specific in saying this, that, the other thing needs to be fictionally appropriate. That's the wording they use. So doomed, you're in grave danger. Empowered, we don't need to go over the specifics of the. Suffice to say, they're good ideas. Favored, you're buoyed by circumstance. Choose an additional basic or master technique in the next exchange. So these are very specific mechanical effects, but they're integrated very specifically into the fiction. You know, they're adaptable, but they do something specific. Impaired, you're slowed or off balance. Mark 1 fatigue or take -2 to all physical actions. And then it gives examples here. You're on slippery ice, or coughing because there's smoke filling the air, or you're sinking slowly into mud. This is stuff that a character can inflict on another character using their bending or their techniques. Sorry, bending is a technique. Understand what I'm saying? And it has a specific effect. But it's all fictionally appropriate. There's no, like, stuff in D&D where you're just poisoned and you take poison damage. And then you stop taking poison damage after a while, you know? So these are the techniques. These are the actual techniques you choose. As you can see, each one is tied to a stance. So when you can ready, and remember, defend and maneuver goes first. So you're ready. You mark 1 fatigue to ready yourself for your environment, assigning or clearing a fictionally appropriate status of nearby characters or yourself. Great. You mark a fatigue, and you change the status. You get rid of a status helping your allies. Retaliate. Do yourself for their blows. Each time a foe inflicts fatigue, a condition or shifts your balance in this exchange, inflict 1 fatigue on that foe. Great. Another great idea. You just counter. You every time you take damage, you do damage. You know, this is pretty simple stuff that you can elaborate a lot on in terms of the description, the prose of what happens, but the mechanics are still specific enough that a player knows exactly how it will play out for them. I think it's just well built. We won't go over every technique, but they're all built like this. Strike. Strike a foe in reach, forcing them to mark -2 fatigue, mark a condition, or shift their balance. Mark 1 fatigue to instead choose to hammer them with your blows, forcing them to mark 2 fatigue. And so on. And again with evade and observe. So you can also use your trainings in combat, and there's a whole list later that I think demonstrates together. And there we go. This is like a nice example of what actually happens, like how a game actually plays out. So let's take a quick look at the playbooks, shall we? These are the playbooks. You may have other playbooks available to you. So they actually, I think they already put this out, but in Wan Shi Tong's Adventure Guide, there's other playbooks available. They'll put out more. So very modular classes in this game. But here we go. I think this art is great. I like it a lot, and I like these ideas for characters. You'll see each one has their own balance, right? Restraint versus results. Forgiveness versus action. Loyalty versus confidence, and so forth. So let's look at a few as examples. This is the Adamant. Pragmatic, fervent, dangerous, self-sacrificing. The Adamant is deeply committed to a cause. Sometimes they might even go a bit too far in their drive. That's why the Adamant needs a lodestar. The one person they listen to who can rein them in, let them know that maybe they should cool it. Oh, and this is George's character, so no, we won't go into too many spoilers. But they're caught between restraint versus results. That makes sense for the character. I think this is where balance really shines in defining a character. You can see their starting stats. All of them are balanced like this. Either they have 2 zeros, a -1, and a +2, or 0, 2 +1s, and a -1. And they have these demeanor options, but like the rules say, you can be pretty loose about what they actually are. You have to answer these history questions, which I think are pretty good. What experience of being deceived or manipulated convinced you to steel yourself against being swayed by the people? Like, it forces you to establish your past trauma and what forms you into the person you are, which is great narratively. These are connections you have to take with other players, so in this game, you do have to take a very specific session 0. Like, I don't know if you could do this game without having a session 0. It would be hard. And they define a moment of balance here, so now we can see what that actually is. You've held true to a core of conviction even while getting your hands dirty, but balance means appreciating that other people are just as complex as you are, not obstacles or pawns. Tell the GM how you solve an intractable problem or calm a terrible conflict by relating to dangerous people on a human level. That's specific. I like that. Again, I have mixed feelings about putting all that on the player in a moment, but maybe it's good to challenge your players that way. And I look forward to seeing George forced to do that. So I'm behind it. And so here you see there's the lodestar. When you shut down someone vulnerable to harsh words or icy silence, blah, blah, blah. So you have a lodestar, and it has to be another PC, and this forces you to depend on other people, basically. And every character has a similar thing like this, but it's all different. You have moves you can choose from. Like, you can reveal you sabotaged a building, takes 1 to know 1. You can only choose a few of these, but you have access to these. You can just increase passion by +1. And so just keep in mind what you're seeing here, right? This is the playbook. In theory, you could print this off and give it to a character, and there's not, like, space for filling out history, and that's why they need the fillable PDFs, but you could give this to a character, and they could just fill in the back of the sheet, I guess. There's no standardized character sheet. In a good way, in this case. I think. So here, for instance, you have pinpoint aim. So this just gives advice to the player on how to play their character. And then finally, each character has their own personal growth question. This is the 4th one they have to ask. The DM asks them, and it's different for each one. Did you seek support or guidance from others? And that just goes right back to the central tension here, restraint versus results. And if you answer that growth question correctly, then you grow a little, and the growth options are usually like add +1 to a stat or attain a new technique. Go for it. So that was one sheet. We'll just take a look at one other one just to get an idea of how they differ. Here's the bold. And by the way, this is like my favorite art. Look, she's just looks like she's having the best life in the world. I wish I was, you know? I wish I could be that. Look, she's flying with a bat. It's awesome. Okay. Anyways, I just really like the art. So the bold, loyalty versus confidence, self-doubting, boastful, clever, curious. You might liken this to like a bard character. But again, it's not specific to what techniques you do. It's specific to your character growth, and because of how the game's built, that's what drives you. You have great creativity, focus, not enough passion. Why do you feel the need to prove yourself so badly? Who epitomizes the kind of big, bold figure you hope to be? And so forth. Perhaps the boulder? Moment of balance. The greatest heroes of your age may have overwhelming confidence, but balance isn't about pursuing greatness for the sake of greatness. You find a way to stand with your companions like no one else ever could. Tell the GM how you strike down an impossibly strong enemy or obstacle to protect your friends from harm as the best version of yourself. Again, purposefully vague. I don't know how I feel about these moment of balance things, but we'll see how that plays out. And see here, like, up here, that's completely different from this section on the sheet. Here, you have a legacy of excellence, and these are specific. When you have these drives, and you have to fulfill, and when you fulfill each one, it says explicitly, when all drives are struck out, change playbooks or accept a position of great responsibility and retire from a life of adventure. Like, these playbooks are so different, and I really like that. And here, you know, each one has very different things. Your best friend is small, fuzzy, and dependable. This one gives you your own little animal companion. You could outline a plan. Once per session, when you're taken out, shift your balance towards center to stay up for one more combat exchange. And then the growth question. Did you express vulnerability by admitting you were wrong, or that you should have listened to someone you ignored? Again, I think limitation is a birthplace of creativity. I think it's good stuff. And yeah, so I hope that gives you an idea of how the playbooks work. I'm a really big fan of the playbook system, and I'm looking forward to see how each player interacts with their playbooks when we start on Monday. So let's go past the playbooks here, and again, like, great art. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this guy. Look at this guy in his rock. Look at this person in their fucking the hammer. Love it. Look at this guy, the pillar, and he's a swamp bender. So you know this is my man. Idealist whose ideals involve making all water dirty. Support versus leadership. Make all water dirty. There's something there. Okay, so you all get the idea. Character advancement. So when you grow, you know, we already went over this. We go over the questions. What ends a session? I like this because it's, you know, you could actually have these gross questions in the middle of a session and then kind of move on to the next. It depends on the timing. That's where this idea of episodism shines. You ask the growth questions. This just specifies examples of that. We don't run this too much. When your character is marked all 4 boxes, they advance. So here's what you can do when you advance. Take a new move from your playbook, like the moves you saw there with the check boxes. Take a new move from another playbook, which I think is a really interesting idea. Basically multi-class when you level up, or multi-play. Raise a stat by +1, maximum to +2. Shift your center 1 step. So that lets you shift your center towards the ideal. And that, I think, is... resolves a lot of my issues with the balance problem that I established earlier. When you take this advancement, you can immediately shift your center 1 step any way you like. Remember that your center is your default. If your center goes past +3, then it's time to retire or change your character. So at the end of the day, the game does allow you to ultimately choose a side in your ideals. This is probably something, because it doesn't affect as much mechanically, that you're going to be choosing later on in the game. And that's why it says, you know, when you do this, you should retire when you reach +3. This is a good idea, and I think resolves a lot of the issues I was talking about earlier with the balance as a mechanic. And you unlock your moment of balance. So you can use a moment of balance once, which was those things we were reading earlier. And I'm a little iffy on this, but I'd like to see a player try it. Because basically this is like you stop time and you resolve whatever the central conflict is. It's the MacGuffin of of these campaigns. So I dig it. There's some advanced techniques, so you can learn these techniques. You go learned, practiced, mastered, and that affects how easily it is to roll them. It leaves, like, practice techniques, you literally just have to use it once, but as discussed earlier, you have to roll a +10 in combat just to use a mastered technique, so harder than it sounds, or a practice technique. And then to master a technique, that's a little more subjective. It's up to the GM. Usually there's a mastery condition that must be fulfilled, and that's like a classic like trope, like you must you have to use it to resolve a certain conflict, master the wax on, wax off, and so forth. When you spend time, we already went over this, they just repeat that here, but this is how you get trained. And I like this because the only way to learn new moves in this way is by engaging with a teacher established by the GM. This is kind of like the magic items of this, but because it's from a teacher and you don't just attune, there's specific criteria you have to meet that are character driven. It ties again into that idea of character advancement, tying directly to your growth as a character. Growth emotionally, that is. And this just describes this just describes how that works in very specific detail that we don't need to go over. But here's some example of mastery conditions. Defeat a specific foe in combat. Surrender. Lose your balance. Be taken out. Seek a specific mystical or ancient location. Return an important artifact to its proper place. Find and listen to an opposing teacher. Build a structure of spiritual or local import. So, like, there's a lot of options here. It's up to the DM. But this is a very thorough list, and I'll probably be appealing to it while I'm running the game. And they have this idea that I think Iroh established in the second season of you having like worldly knowledge and being able to kind of mix and match these ideas together so that one technique is easier to learn when you know another technique. Here's specialized bending. This is unique stuff, and I think it says that like you can only attain this by learning it in game, because this is, I mean, like, we have blood bending in here, so obviously this isn't something you can learn as a starting character. You develop specialized bending, change your character when you lose your balance. Again, we're at this balance point where, like, you just can't shift your balance in the other way. And again, I don't know, you know. I feel like this isn't as mechanically relevant as they're trying to make it. You can also change playbooks, right, as your character grows, but I think, as the game says, usually when you've completely exhausted your playbook, it's a good idea just to retire a character, as it says. And that's going to happen around the end of the campaign. Also, center shifts as character arcs, and so on. Running the game. Thanks. So this just tells GMs how to GM. Again, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about deciding the scope. Like, I don't know if they really need to outline this for the GM. It's just very specific, and I don't know if I feel comfortable like making explicit these ideas right at the start of a campaign. Like these, I guess I understand. Like, you want to make the world feel real. You want to make their stories meaningful. Is this something we really need to outline? I guess kids could be using this. I don't know. But we'll skip over it. Because this really is just basic, like, guide to GMing guidelines. Describe a wondrous world with a deep history and so forth. But I mean, if this section is for teaching new GMs how to GM, this is a lot to put on like a first-time GM. Like, imagine having to keep all of this in mind your first time ever GMing for your friends. That's a lot of things, right? I just feel like this section could have been edited down or simplified based on what they were going for. And then you have this idea of GM moves. And again, you don't, like, you know, this isn't something that needs to be made explicit. because these aren't mechanical moves. This is just the GM deciding to do something. Telling a player that the beams of the burning building creak ominously, or inflict fatigue or a condition, reveal a hidden truth, you know, shift their balance. These aren't mechanical moves, and I think it's weird that they made them, call them GM moves, when it's really just, you know, this is stuff the GM can do. Why not? The GM already controls the game. I don't see why they need to make this explicit, or why it needs to be outlined so thoroughly. It's like feels like they're almost penning the GM into choosing specific ways to affect characters. These are good examples, but the fact that they made this like a mechanical, raw thing, I don't get it. I don't understand, and I probably won't be appealing to this chapter at all while I'm running the game, because it just seems redundant at best and restricting in a bad way at worst. Yeah, like, shift the odds suddenly. You know, why tell, like, does the GM need to know this? That they can do this? That they can shift the odds suddenly? It's weird. Turn a move back on them. Like, these are good ideas, but I don't understand why these have been encoded into the book like this. This is just how to make NPCs, and I think the NPCs, I think this is like straight out of Powered by the Apocalypse. We'll just go to the Npc Example Sheets here. So as you can see, they only have one balance principle. They only have one principle. They don't have a balance at the center. They usually have more fatigue than the players if they're important, and they can come in groups. They have a simple drive. Like, these are relatively simple things. But here's like a master NPC, so you can see they have several fatigues. They have conditions that aren't even in the thing, like it just has to be creative with them. And they have a simple drive. In my opinion, all you need to outline when you're making a character like this is to, I guess they need conditions. You don't really need to outline the drive if you know who the character is. But it's very, like, the actual mechanics involved in creating an NPC are very simple. And I appreciate that, because, again, it's roleplay focused. And the personality of the NPC should emerge as you play them. And it also talks about groups of NPCs and how when you're fighting groups, since you're all main characters, fighting a group doesn't really make sense to have each one have its own stat block. And that's great. It outlines specifically how to, like, level them up, but these are more guidelines, right? Again, I like how they make these guidelines. And you have legendary NPCs, which they outline, like, they give stats to the avatars, all of them. And again, I don't understand why they do that, because you're never going to meet the avatars, or if you do, you're never going to, like, fight them. You know, it's a weird choice. But they have to do that because it's Avatar Legends. Blah, 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 managing bending. This is all pretty subjective stuff. The GM advice. A sample of how combat works. Here's how to build campaigns, and again, we're getting into this weird obsession with making it like a perfect 3-act narrative structure, and I think that's just something that can emerge naturally between the GM and players with the system they've already set up. I think it's pretty redundant to outline a lot of this. I appreciate that they outline this for new GMs, but a lot of this seems redundant. If they trust the mechanics of their system, then a lot of it should emerge naturally from the game. That being said, like, there's nice advice for beginner GMs here. Ask questions constantly, never stop asking for more details. Why did you decide this outpost was the right one to attack? Who trained to use your swords with scalestone walls? Like it's good ideas. I just, you know, we could just skip past this and crafting a season. You want to make these seasons, and they gotta have balance, and they gotta have scope, and it just seems like a lot to... If you're an experienced GM, then you don't need this, right? Because you understand how to run the game. And if you're a new GM, this is a lot to put on a new GM running a campaign for the first time. Can you imagine being 13 years old and trying to do this? You know, it's explicitly, like, outlining this. It's just, like, who is this for? I don't get it. This is how character arts work. This is how creating threats works. Again, like, good advice, but the amount they outline, finales, like, I don't know if you need to outline this. It's too much. It's too much for new people, and it's redundant for people who are experienced. And again, running adventures. You know, at this point when I was reading through this on the train, I just started skipping past because I knew this chapter would just be more of that previous stuff. Lots of redundant information. There are some neat ideas here. These escalations, like this clock. I used that in the one shot we ran, but I don't. You know, are you really gonna do this with like experienced PCs or a GM having like showing that the stakes are increasing by filling out the clock? Or I do like it says there's a whole outline here for how to do flashbacks, which is wild. You know, why specify this? Just say you can do flashbacks. Why have an outline for how to do flashbacks in such a specific mechanical way? It's y'all know I run flashbacks every time I run games, and it's just so weird seeing it outlined like this. Special circumstances, anchor NPC. You know, they're making it into a show in a not good way, because it's, at this point, like an anchor NPC, at this point it feels like you're steamrolling the PCs into a very specific story, when they should be the ones that are growing and evolving and changing the world. So no, I think this is the weak point of this game. Of this book, is the last few chapters. Much like Aang's experience in the hit series Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yes, exactly. This I appreciate. These are just simple adventure hooks from each era. Pretty banal, simple stuff. That's a fun way to start a game. I might use some of these for the Roku one, for that matter. Like these are fun stuff. Some of them are really silly, like Michi is the son of a famous Fire Nation general. He's forsworn the wealth of his family. Michi's dad won't let him go without a fight, and Michi needs help getting a guiding wind camp for the mercenaries his father hired catch up with him, or rescuing a dragon egg that's being hunted down, and so forth. Like, just simple stuff. Fun stuff to include. I'm glad they added this. And then here is a one-shot, I believe, that you can run. Or just to show you how to run it, and no comment here. I ran the quick start one, and I think it was of similar quality, and it was fine. Nothing groundbreaking. It felt like an episode of the show, for better or worse, and I assume this one is like that too. But, however, importantly, they do give stats and an outline for the Cabbage Merchant. So this is the canonical Cabbage Merchant stats. Remember, folks, this is the Here, yeah, I know, right? He should be the final boss. But this is the canonical Cabbage Merchant stats. And then they give... This is a very thorough outline for a one-shot, honestly. But it's for new players, and... No, you know what? That's great. That's great. It's good they give this advice. This is how you should teach a GM how to run a game. By giving a one-shot like this. Not that, like, way too much information in those last few chapters. Okay, and finally we get to the appendices, and this is just like the techniques. It's already 7 o'clock, so I gotta go soon. But hopefully this just gives general... We already looked at these techniques, but these are group techniques that only NPCs can use, for instance. So these are the things you can only learn by choosing your thing. So waterbenders, you see how they have this asterisk here. That means you can't start with it, because this is bloodbending. But Breath of Ice. You become ready to breathe shivering cold upon any foe. Any foe engaged with you at any point in this exchange becomes impaired until they clear the ice from their limbs. Right. Refresh. Mark fatigue to heal an ally in reach who is evading and observing. Clear an appropriate status from them and clear 3 fatigue or 3 conditions. So you have the same thing for earthbending techniques, firebending, airbending, weapons, and technology, and... You know, I didn't go too deep into these, but from what I can see, these are all pretty balanced between each other. It helps that it's a relatively simple combat system. Maybe there will be a meta someday, but since this is so narratively focused anyways, I don't think it matters. But you have a lot of options as a weapons master and as a tech master. And finally, here's just pre-built NPCs to show you how it works. Political leader, master NPCs, accomplished general, so on and so forth. Just examples. Here's the avatars stat sheets, like each one I don't know why they specify this, because again, it says explicitly in the module, I'm just going off rules as written, the avatar should only appear as a cameo. Like, you're not supposed to have the avatar be around for long, because they'll take up the whole story. So I don't know why they go so hard on specifying this, but I guess they have to. And it is a nice example of what, like, the most powerful character in the game would look like. So, fair. Here's Avatar Roku's. You can do Lava Wave. Here's General Arroz. This is Arrow's stat sheet. I guess Iroh is in the ranks of the avatars. But like he knows Redirect Lightning, Lightning Blast, and you know, these are all things, nicely, these are all things that are in that techniques list above, right? They're all accessible. Air Scooter, Flame Knives, Hurl Metal. And then here's the play materials. So, just good reference stuff. But there's no fillable PDFs for playbooks. God damn it, you know? Why? That's... What were they thinking? These are just reference sheets. And again, a campaign creation worksheet. Which, I guess, great for new players, but, like, who's gonna use this? Who's gonna use this? Really? You know? Like... It feels almost patronizing to have this. I get it, but I don't know. Nice reference sheet. Good NPC sheet just to use on the side. I'll probably print some of these off and use them for my own purposes. And an index, and that's it. That is Avatar Legends. Make sure you buy your Wan Chi Tong's Adventure Guide, and Avatar Legends Dice Pack, and Avatar Legends Combat Action Deck to really, truly bring your game to life. 3 to 6 players, 2 to 4 hours. Rated E for everyone. And that, my friends, is Avatar Legends. So, I got like 10 minutes. If y'all have any questions or comments I'd like to go over. Otherwise, you know, thank you for tuning in. That went a lot longer than I thought it would. I guess I had a lot to talk about, but I'm glad I worked through it because it made the game a lot clearer to me too. So thank you all for tuning in and helping me figure out how I feel about this game. And I hope you just enjoyed this overview. Tell us an Avatar hot take. Okay, fine. I'll tell you my Avatar hot take. Okay? This is my Avatar hot take. Let me put on some real music. So, my Avatar hot take is that The Legend of Korra has serious theming issues. This is what's gonna get you. Yes, definitely. And I'll tell you why. The Last Airbender was a very holistic, it was a great series. I don't think anybody denies that it was better than Korra. Korra's, I think it was still a good series, but it had some flaws. And this, my friends, is the reason. The real reason is that they had no idea whether or not they were going to get continued for a season, and so they had to, like, ham-fistedly end every season with a weird resolution that shouldn't have been there. But my reason is that the original Avatar series had this focus on balance. That's the main theme. The Avatar has to bring balance to the world. And that's the theme of this book, right? That's the whole theme of Avatar. The problem is, in The Legend of Korra, they switched the narrative from dealing with this very, like, good guys versus bad guys, and the whole problem is that the Fire Nation is attacking the world, and that's a very clear problem that requires balance. But in Legend of Korra, the problems that are faced by the characters are the status quo, right? In the first season, it's non-benders versus benders, and in the third season, it's Zahir and, like, this anarchist philosophy versus the structures of feudalism and, dare I say, capitalism that rule this new Avatar world. And in the second season, I don't know what the fuck was going on, and in the fourth season, it was fascist. The problem is, the Avatar is supposed to bring balance, and that's the key ideology that the show returns to. But how are you supposed to bring balance to the world when the whole conflict of the show is that the status quo is inadequate? So that's why every season has to end on these this like ham-fisted ending of like either Amon being a false flag or Zahir just being too violent, so he was wrong or whatever. You know, and it doesn't feel very satisfying because they don't address the core systemic issues that caused all these problems in the story in the first place. Nothing's actually resolved like it is in The Last Airbender. And I worry, actually, for this game that might be one of the problems we run into long-term with the campaign, is that this focus on balance won't allow us to examine the systemic critique, even though so much of the book is focused on establishing these, you know, systems of discrimination and systemic inequity. Also, like, you know, it's based on this Eastern philosophy and Taoism and Shintoism, but then it applies this very Western liberal idea of, I use like capital L liberal in this context of, you know, like having the right person in charge, and that's what makes things good, and it just doesn't seem to jive well between the two philosophies. So that's my Avatar hot take. That's what I hope to deconstruct in this game. That's going to be happening at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. And what I really think is that the Cabbage Merchant is the true main character of Avatar, and I love him, and I want to have his cabbage children. So, okay. So thank you all for tuning in. We were up to 10 viewers. That's pretty good. So thanks everybody for tuning in and listening on today's Tuesday. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be doing the Community Challenge Total Improv episode at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. That's going to be the Men in Black Candyland crossover episode. That was chosen by our patrons over on Patreon. You can support Total Improv on Patreon too at patreon.com/totalimprov. That'll be in D&D. And then we'll do another session on Friday at 2 p.m., I believe. Just a regular one-shot. And then on Monday at 1 p.m., tune in for me and George, a.k.a. Mr. Dragonlord S, for some Avatar Legends. We're going to try it out. We're going to do a session 0, see how far we get. It's going to be regulars from this channel. I'm pretty confident it'll be fun and a good time. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to follow if you haven't, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And remember, folks, don't... Hold on, let's just steal a lesson from Avatar Legends. Remember, folks, man, shit, there's no morals here. Where's the moralizing? Okay. Remember, folks, don't eat yellow snow, okay? Okay. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Thanks. Peace.